Illustrating the book. Believe it or not, an essential step. Some people like to illustrate it themselves. So, you know, this is my dream, this is my book, and I'm going to put this fantastic illustration together. They may not necessarily be the world's best illustrator, but if that's what they want to do, it's the dream book. Second area is use design elements to illustrate. Now, I say this here because not every illustration is traditional hand-drawn illustrations. A design element to break up the text of your book is essential. Every book must have illustrations, but that design element could even be the way the title's laid on that page. It could be a graph illustrating a point. It could be anything that's breaking your text up, a photograph, an image that's relevant to whatever you're talking about. It may not be like a children's book and illustrated on every page, but if there is nothing there, if your audience is looking at a plain text, empty page, and it's just words after words after words, you're going to have a very unsatisfied reader. Generally, the passive income book that uses this format because they want a cheap and economical way of getting their book out there to make money. Third area is to have your book professionally illustrated, which people are obviously familiar with, and that's generally the publicity book. This book has to be perfect, so I'm going to pay a fortune to get someone to make it look that way for me. Not necessarily true, but common thought for that line of books. Key things about illustration. Firstly, every book needs illustrations. Now, I said that before, but I can't emphasize that enough. A book without illustrations is basically a flat book. There's some samples behind me which you can come up and look at a later stage. Every single one of them has some element of illustrations. Even if it's only, as I said, the titles or subtitles that break it up in a different font, in a different size. Something that is an illustrating element that is not plain text. Very important. The second thing is an illustration is not necessarily a hand-drawn image. Now, I went through that briefly before, but anything you can think of, if it's not text, it's classed as an illustration. Now, this is the third step in the publishing process. It's the last step in the pre-publishing process, and you need all these elements together before you jump into the publishing process. So even if your illustration element is just, say, a couple of graphs, you want those graphs finished and ready to go before you jump into the next step. Third area is use of illustrations must be consistent. And that's the same as what I was saying with the editing. You want your text consistent. You want people to see that this book isn't just a random chapter thrown next to another random chapter, but fits together as a whole unit. Very important with your illustrations as well. If you've got a picture in chapter 1, say that's line art, you've got a photo in chapter 2, you've got a clip art picture in chapter 3, you've got all different things happening. They won't look consistent. Pick your style and stick with it.